The descent. The interactive game starts. Pleasure, Neil. Pain, Neil. He's tired of procrastinating. He spends hours daydreaming about pursing his dream of being a creator, facing his demons, and mastering himself. He finally sits in front of his computer, stares at a blank screen to begin planning, and wonders why his mind has just gone blank. The wall of resistance is quelling his ability for deep work and to feel pleasure, and the fear of punishment begins to set it. There's just too much uncertainty. Pleasure, 0. Pain, 1. The pain from being in a state of overthinking, analysis, paralysis, and resistance outgrew the reward, and he needed to return to a balanced state of allostasis with a quick fix. He opened up Twitter to gauge some inspiration from creators that he wanted to be like. Maybe he can get some new, pleasurable ideas. The algorithm's bias to survivorship and hyperbolic discounting showed him the most popular creators using professional-grade production with millions of followers, tens of thousands of likes, and retweets. He automatically compared their popularity to his own and felt like a loser whilst craving to be desired just like them. No followers, no likes, and no retweets. His bias towards comparison turned his search for inspiration into a state of insecurity through intimidation. He felt like he couldn't compete. Why even try? Pleasure, 0. Pain, 2. He switched to TikTok as his previous search for pleasure produced unexpected pain. Scrolling infinitely, he felt pangs of pleasure at first. Being sucked into the vortex, the pangs turned into chronic overstimulation, and just like ice cream, with the first lick feeling amazing, the consecutive licks became less and less pleasureful. The depletion of pleasure gave way for the pain to seep in. Pleasure, 1. Pain, 3. Nudging himself to the present, he reverted back to his blank screen, and his availability bias reminded him of his previous encounter with comparison and overstimulation. The goal of planning his dreams became too daunting. He logs off into the void of escapism. Game over. It's a loss. Pleasure, 2. Pain, 4. Maybe his dreams can wait another time.
We humans were never designed to live in cities. It wasn't until end of the agricultural revolution and the start of the cognitive revolution that we began seeing others as strangers. The predicted average group size in traditional human cultures was 150, referred to as Dunbar's number. Now that number is infinite. Traditionally, we only needed to compare ourselves to our immediate tribe, and now we have the privilege of comparing ourselves to billions of people with their highlight reels. Once that 150 threshold is crossed, things begin to work differently. You cannot run a division with thousands of soldiers the same way you run a platoon, so we invented common myths. Any large-scale human cooperation, whether a modern state, a medieval church, an ancient city, or an archaic tribe, is rooted in common myths that exist only in people's collective imagination. Our primitive emotions were never designed to handle the unlimited supply of fake news, outrage, algorithmic bias, and the fear of missing out. Our search for inspiration on social media quickly turns into envy as we have an unlimited supply of scrolling. Dopamine was the engine of success for our ancestors. It gave us the ability to create tools, invent science, plan for the future, and made us the dominant species on the planet after living in scarcity and on the brink of extinction. In the modern age of abundance, however, dopamine is continuing to drive us forward, perhaps to our own destruction. Daniel Lieberman, author of The Molecule of More, writes,
Technology develops fast, while evolution is slow. Our brains evolved at a time when survival was in doubt. That's less of a problem in the modern world, but we're stuck with our ancient brains. It's possible that we won't last beyond another half-dozen generations. We've simply become too good at gratifying our dopaminergic desires. Not all forms of more and new and novel are good for an individual, and the same is true for a species. Dopamine doesn't stop. It drives us ever onward into the abyss.
Exclusion. User experience has been gamified and converted into a new business model. The more you pay, the better the user experience. We have reached a dire state in design where engagement is now being charged per interaction. An example being apps like Tinder charging one-off payment for 24-hour boosted exposure, unlimited swipes, and who liked your reveals. Many popular social platforms today seem to employ the same uncreative, elusive business model of choosing profit over user experience and the well-being of their users. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tinder, Bumble, and even Dribble promise free usage of their product. Creators invest thousands of hours engaging with communities, building a large following and also building the platform itself through network effects, only to have the algorithm exploit their bias towards loss aversion. Creators are hit with the wall and told that their reach is limited, requiring a payment to continue. The function of this elusive business model is to hook us through the freemium model, exploiting our biases towards hyperbolic discounting, conformity, or negativity, not just to contribute and share through salience framing and anchoring, polarize us through verification, then tarnish the entire user experience, limiting our exposure and reach through loss aversion, scarcity, and the aforementioned biases that got us hooked in the first place. Our reach in search results, timelines, and replies are deprioritized, leading us to distorted thoughts about being excluded and FOMO. Finally, we are taunted with blurred images and obfuscated text of how close we are to avoiding the loss and what we are missing out on. This is not what we signed up for. Comparison. There is a tragic trend in the world of tech where apps attempt to match the competition and alienate their own user base. Facebook copies TikTok, Facebook copies Twitter, Facebook copies Snapchat, and so forth. This is due to the lack the creativity and originality to innovate by blindly copying the features of their competitors in an attempt to lure their rivals' user base to their own platform. This form of competition-driven design is one of the reasons why elusive design has become so prevalent, as these copycats are exposing and reinforcing so many interactive patterns to users that are not well thought out. Platforms like the App Store are saturated with millions of apps competing for consumers' attention. The state of tech would be much better off if they focused on their strengths rather than weaknesses. Users tend to age over time, and companies need to keep the retention up every quarter to satisfy their investors and ever-changing audience. As creators, we assume that success will come fast as our worldview is distorted through highly curated algorithmic content. We only see the most popular videos, tweets, and posts with thousands of likes and assume with the support of our bias towards survivorship that we can achieve instant success with our first post. What the algorithm isn't telling us is that the content pushed to the top of the queue has been cherry-picked from hundreds of failed videos that have spent years experimenting on finding market fit. Social platforms are pushing us to connect less with our friends and more with brands. Influencers are hired to prey on those who are impressionable and sell products that they themselves most likely do not use. Our bias towards authority makes us feel that they know what they're talking about, and our bias towards affinity increases the likelihood that we'll buy, as they surely understand what we are going though. Comparison turns an iterative game into a race to the bottom. Mental health, teen anxiety, depression, and suicide rates have risen sharply in the last few years. Hatred has become widespread, proliferating extremists from the far left and right. We now retreat into our self-confirmatory bubbles amplified by extremists and trolls intent on polarizing us and them. The rapid growth of social media in the years after the iPhone was released allowed teens to check in on their social media status every few minutes, and many did. For a long time, studies have shown that girls have higher rates of depression and anxiety than boys do after puberty. Since 2011, as social media was taking off, the rates of depression began increasing. In 2016, roughly 1 in every 5 girls reported having a major depressive episode. What is specifically about social media that is causing such destruction? Jonathan Haidt, author of The Coddling of the American Mind, writes,
The first is that social media presents curated versions of lives, and girls may be more adversely affected than boys by the gap between appearance and reality. Many have observed that for girls more than for boys, social life revolves around inclusion and exclusion. Social media vastly increases the frequency with which teenagers see people they know having fun and doing things together, including things to which they themselves were not invited. While this can increase FOMO, fear of missing out, which affects both boys and girls, scrolling through hundreds of such photos, girls may be more pained than boys by what Georgetown University linguistics professor Deborah Tannen calls FOBLO, fear of being left out. When a girl sees images of her friends doing something she was invited to do but couldn't attend, missed out, it produces a different psychological effect than when she is intentionally not invited, left out. And as Twenge reports, girls use social media more often, giving them additional opportunities to feel excluded and lonely when they see their friends or classmates getting together without them. The number of teens of all ages who feel left out, whether boys or girls, is at an all-time high, according to Twenge, but the increase has been larger for girls. From 2010 to 2015, the percentage of teen boys who said they often felt left out increased from 21 to 27. For girls, the percentage jumped from 27 to 40. Another consequence of social media curation is that girls are bombarded with images of girls and women whose beauty is artificially enhanced, making girls ever more insecure about their own appearance. It's not just fashion models whose images are altered nowadays. Platforms such as Snapchat and Instagram provide filters that girls use to enhance the selfies they pose for and edit, so even their friends now seem to be more beautiful. These filters make noses smaller, lips bigger, and skin smoother. This has led to a new phenomenon. Some young women now want plastic surgery to make themselves look like they do in their enhanced selfie.
The generic social platform consists of a feed where user-generated content can elicit FOMO using curated highlight reels and variable rewards from the mix of mundane and relevant content. However, there's also the platforms that enable pathological behavior such as narcissism through the use of beauty filters, leading victims to compare their flawed features to the features of the flawless. To conform and avoid being left out, others use and promote these filters, leading to a recursive viral loop of exposure. The engagement algorithm then picks this up and places it at the front of the most trending, as it assumes that is what the people want. Viewers are then consuming this content, taking augmented reality from reality and diminishing their self-esteem. What other interactions directly affect our sense of reality and well-being? Other popular social components consist of a leader, follower, and an upvote, downvote interface that fluctuates arbitrarily. What kind of distorted over-generalizations are our minds exposed to when seeing an update? When a new follower is received, we get a dopamine hit, receiving validation that our social status has been elevated. The follower, however, could be a bot, a troll, a user posing as someone else, a user wanting a superficial follow back, or even a browser caching issue. When a follower is lost, we are left jumping to conclusions about whether we did something wrong, as we feel a sense of rejection when the loss could have been the removal of bots from an algorithm update. When swiping on Tinder, we wonder whether these profiles are real, fake, or abandoned. Are we wasting our time? Do they still use it, or have they given up? How accurate does this person's profile reflect their real life? There is no way to verify this accurately. Common interactions on dating apps eventually lead to pathological behavior through ghosted messages, whilst being a perfect playground for psychopaths looking for their next prey. Swiping profiles becomes a numbers game through matches for the ultimate award of high self-esteem. Being inundated with profiles where intentions differ from the bio, it leaves one in a distorted state of affairs. We have TikTok causing Tourette's syndrome for girls, glorifying context switching, depleting our dopamine reserves, and doctors actually mistaking this behavior for EDA. Just like the social feed, these superficial interactions have consequences in the long run that exploit our biases and elevate distorted thinking patterns, as they do not reflect the core design principle of matching real-world convention. Dark patterns do not cover this. We can achieve fulfillment at the end of the day through giving our minds more meaningful things to do, develop healthier habits, and achieve allostasis rather than being semi-conscious and giving our attention and energy to platforms that do not care for our values and boundary.
The ascent Taking deep breaths, he observed his thoughts and how his daily interactions made him feel. Counting how many times he felt good and felt bad from each interaction on and offline, the scale tipped heavily towards the negative, and he knew from that moment he'll need to rebalance the scale by engaging in deep work and limiting his exposure to these elusive reminders.
The content in this video is only a small portion of the entire article. Consider subscribing to our Substack using the link in the description below and get full access to the unique elusive interaction patterns and how they exploit our biology and cognition along with the solution. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to help support the research into the invasive world of elusive design through everyday interactions. To learn more about the biology, science, and psychology of design and how you can realize your legend, visit circlo.com and join our newsletter.